Yes, I'm a very much a political moderate. I believe that people have different life experiences. We need to learn from all of them. And I take the best ideas from the left, the best ideas from the right, form my own, personal ideology, but always respect others as well.
This is Jeff Burningham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where we interview people that you may or may not have heard of. Today, we have one of our best guests ever, Natalie Gochnour. Are you here?
I'm here. Hi, Jeff.
You're
Thanks
here
for
with
having
us. Me. Let me remind our listeners before we jump in with Natalie. Natalie is everywhere, by the way. I didn't really appreciate that as much as I did until I ran for governor. And then you were just at everything and in everywhere. This is one of the most impressive people in Utah, a dear friend. I'm grateful to be with her. Before we jump into this conversation that I think you will find really interesting, let me remind you the purposes of the podcast. Number one, no matter our differences, and we are all different in many ways, we are always a lot more alike. Let's build from common ground with people that are different than us. We are all fellow travelers. Number two, because of that, let's have compassion for each other. We're all struggling. We all have different challenges and are going through things. Less comparison and more compassion is the order of the day, in my opinion. And third and lastly, too often we let mistakes of the past or fear for an unknown future, which we're going to talk about the future today because we are living in an interesting time, but we can't control everything about the future. We do not need to let fear paralyze us, paralyze our decisions, or affect our decisions too much. Let's go forward in faith, making the very best that we possibly can of our time here on earth. I'm grateful to be with Natalie Gochnour today. Natalie, when I read your bio, resume, et cetera, just recently, briefly, I can't. It would take an hour just to say everything about you, Natalie.
You're kind to say that, but it's really not that impressive. Basically, you finish college and doors open and you walk through them.
Oh, Natalie, I want to ask you more about that. But let me tell you a little bit more. If you haven't heard of Natalie, if you're one of the few Utahns that haven't, let me just remind you, she's an associate dean at the U of U and still teaching.
That's right. I serve in the David Eccles School of Business and teach a public finance class that's in the economics department.
Cool. Do you enjoy that?
I do. I see we have one master's in public policy degree given in this state, and it's at the University of Utah, and they're required to take my class. So I see everybody that gets a master's in public policy. That's
in the state of Utah.
Yeah, because there are no other schools offering it. So that's the big takeaway for me.
That's awesome. Fantastic teacher. Oh, and by the way, I'll call Dean Randall, no longer Dean, President Randall, right?
That's
when did that happen into the last couple months?
Yeah, just the last few weeks. I think it's probably about 4 weeks in. President Randall is a third generation University of Utah professor.
Okay.
So just think of that, how special that is.
Wow.
He's taken the Eccles School to be a top 20 business school in the country.
Yep.
And I have a feeling that the University of Utah will follow a similar trajectory. It's already a terrific public university, but it will become even better.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And you're excited about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, have they announced a new dean for the business school?
National search. We have an interim dean, Rachel Hayes, terrific woman who's, very qualified to help at the school, but they'll do a national search.
That's exciting. She's also the director of the Kem C Gardner Institute. And how does it feel to be Kem's boss? I'm just kidding. No one is Kem Gardner's boss. We love that guy. How is it working with Kem? And, that's fun.
I tell people, Kem's a big guy with a big wallet and a big heart.
And a big personality.
Big personality.
Yeah.
I was worried initially that he might try to be overbearing and get too involved at the Institute. He's none of that. Kem, the big heart is the biggest part for me. He's always wanting us to do things that serve the public good. He's very generous with the Institute. And so I have absolutely loved working, under his name at the Kem C Gardner Policy Institute. And, we aim to be a important center for thought leadership in our state.
Yeah.
And with the help of the 30 great team, the group of 30 that I have there, we're doing some amazing work.
Yeah, and you are for sure. I know that we looked at a lot of your data when I was running for governor. That was a lot of the data that was used in public policy discussions and debates and otherwise. She's also a podcaster and a writer extraordinaire and an economist, and we could go on, but I know she doesn't love the spotlight. I read it, like I said, I read a little bit of bio here this afternoon, and this came out, I don't know if it was on your webpage, Natalie, or whatever, but this line, and I want to ask you about it. Something like you hope for or envision a simpler life for everyone. Is this ringing a bell?
Sure, yeah.
Talk to it. So I don't think that you really lead a simple life. And I think, she's worked in the Bush administration in D.C. She's been an advisor to several governors, including Governor Levitt, which we'll talk about. I don't know. That's not simple. Politics isn't simple. Public policy isn't simple. But I'm just curious. I just love that line in your bio, a simpler life for everyone. Talk to us about that.
If I told you, Jeff, that you can vacuum my entire house without changing the plug, would that get me in the characteristic of being simple?
Yes, I love that.
I have a very modest home. Think of a home in Sugar House, that's very small, and you can vacuum the whole upstairs without changing the plug.
Yeah.
One time I was involved in some, for lack of a better term, just professional coaching. Someone was helping me think through how you manage professional life. And you've probably seen this, but they give you a stack of cards that's 120 cards that have, attributes on them. Mm-hmm. Beauty, selflessness, kindness, family, church, just on and on. And you're supposed to put them into this is me, this isn't me, and this is definitely not me. Anyway, and you put them into that, and so you get to a stack of about 40, and then they say, okay, take that 40 and now get it down to 20.
Yeah.
Now get it to 10, and then get it to 3. And one of my 3 was simplicity.
Really?
Yeah. And so for me, it's a real. I like to get through the details and get to the essence of things. I think it's really a secret to some of my professional success because I distill things. I'm always looking for the core.
Yeah.
And so when I say a simpler life, it's a life that's focused on the things that matter most to you. And I have, all sorts of ways of thinking about that.
I love that quote, and I love that attitude. That's something you share in common, by the way, with my wife, Sally. Okay. She is she's simple like that, but powerful, right?
Yeah,
very focused on what matters. And I wanted to ask you about your, what are some keys to your success? Because it's easy to say, I graduated and walked through doors. I wish I'm sure every graduate wished that that's what happens. And, everyone measures success in a different way. I don't, when you've been around presidents, which you have, and governors, and I don't know, you don't necessarily idolize anyone. You know that everyone has their foibles. Mm-hmm. You may greatly respect and admire people, but, whether you're a janitor or the governor or whatever the case may be, there's different, but what you found amazing success. I love that you went right to a key, which is distilling, maybe being able to cut through all the noise and know what's most important. What other keys would you say you've had to your success?
Well, I'm not someone who is this big, ambitious, aspirational, I got to get to here and then to here and then to here. I never, ever thought of being a professional woman. I'm more of one of those, I call it just someone who lives by destiny. Mm-hmm. I just follow those gentle promptings within and follow that. And so for me, really, I feel like, I'm doing the things that come very natural to me, that play to my strengths. I've had terrific mentors. Now, they've almost always been male. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But Brad Barber was one of my first bosses. Brad's a terrific guy, an economist, and he inspired me. And then, Mike Levitt is the mentor that's meant the most to me. Mm-hmm. His chief of staff, Rich McKeon, I'm very close to Rich. And
he's a great guy.
Huge Rich McKeon fan. Lane Beatty at the Salt Lake Chamber taught me a lot of things. And then I've worked with Taylor Randall.
Yeah.
So, these people have given me a green field to run in, I would like to say. And I've just taken the skills and things that I've been taught and tried to put them to good use. I will say that everybody that, progresses in life, has success in life, there's something that is propelling them.
Yeah.
And I'm really easily propelled, highly motivated by serving the community.
That's awesome.
So I've had times in my career where I could have, taken a transition that was more profitable, taken a transition that had more visibility and different things. And I've always found myself, being really proud that I could go to social events. And when we talk about things, everybody wants to talk about the things that I'm involved with deeply, because that's the community. And they don't want to talk about if you owned a dry cleaning operation.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You mentioned there that all these mentors, or a lot of them, have been men. How do you feel about where we're standing in terms of women in the country, maybe, and or even in our state? I'm sure you have some thoughts about that. What are your most recent thoughts or feelings?
Well, this isn't particularly recent, Jeff, but it's something that I've built from, and that is that I'm a big believer in this notion of masculine and feminine values. And I don't mean that in gender roles, but just in the specific, so like a man can have a lot of feminine values and a woman can have a lot of masculine. We all know when we see that. I characterize masculine values as things like competition and power and efficiency, really important things in life. And the feminine values would be more along the lines of stewardship and collaboration, beauty, unity. Some of the things you talk about on this podcast. And in the course of my career, what I've noticed, and this was very evident with Mike Levitt and Aline Walker. So these are my very formative years professionally. They're in office 13 years. I'm watching them every year, and I'm seeing the masculine and feminine values go head to head. And the way I think of it is that you have to have both, right? And it's not surprising that I would say that. But the masculine values come from a foundation of strength. And if the feminine values don't have that strength, they never get heard. So they got to be, but the feminine values come from a foundation of goodness. And if you have strength without goodness, that can lead to abuse. Right? And so I'm a huge proponent of the value of bringing together, the best of feminine and male values. And that's why we're talking about diversity right now in public life.
You're also a mother and have 2 children and a great husband. Do you counsel your children as they're starting their careers or doing different things in their career to kind of follow a similar career path that you did, meaning not climbing the ladder? And by the way, don't politicians kind of have to climb a ladder?
They do.
They do, don't they?
They have to be more than destiny. They have to have fire in their belly. To go do things. It's one of the reasons why I've never run for public office. Is because I'm really comfortable being a second person behind the elected official, helping them along. But you have to absolutely have this fire in your belly to be in the number 1 slot. Do you think that maybe we don't get the best people then to lead us? Do you agree? I believe that there's, I'll call it righteous ambition. And so when we get politicians that have this righteous ambition, then I think we're just fine. And of course, our state is filled with them. I just look at our governors, the string of governors that we've had. They're extraordinary people.
They are. So you're a podcaster, a writer, an economist. You do a ton of research for the Kem C. Gardner Institute. Which do you like best? Of all the roles you play, what do you like best and why,
When I worked in Washington, I was at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services when Mike Levitt was the secretary there. And we were dealing with Medicaid and Medicare and FDA and CDC. Avian flu. All sorts of things. But every once in a while,
none of those things really sound that fun.
That's where I'm going. Every once in a while, he would come into my office and there would be a graph on my screen, and he'd go, "Uh-oh," because it meant that I was drifting. It meant that I was going back to where I find energy. So, when you say, what's my favorite part? I love the quiet moments in my office where I'm analyzing, thinking, writing, quantifying. Those are,
Do you love data?
I do. And yet, I would not characterize myself as this quant. We call them quantitative or quants. I would characterize, I like to work at the intersection of communications and policy. I like to take really complicated things in policy and communicate them well.
Yeah.
So Levar Webb is someone that some of our listeners, your listeners will know. He was a managing editor at the Deseret News. He was a policy director for Governor Levitt. He was the founder of UtahPolicy.com. I mean, Levar is a terrific guy, but he once said that every public policy success is a triumph of communications.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've made it since about, I'm 3 decades in. So since about year 15, I have really focused on the communication side of policy as a way to make good change happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And I think the communication is so much of the key. And we have sure seen a lot of that lacking. We won't jump into COVID maybe too deeply, but we have seen that,
Sure.
right? We have seen that.
Mixed messages.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. And it continues to be a challenge, I think, because
wrong people talking.
Yeah, because of communication issues. I think you're exactly right. So you can already tell that Natalie has an unbelievable breadth of experience. I knew of Natalie before I ran for governor, but I didn't realize that she was in the center of everything until I ran for governor. The very first debate we had, do you remember that in St. George? Mm-hmm. What do you remember about that debate? I'm just curious. Go back to St. George. When was that, like 18 months ago? Anything, I don't know. What did you think of that debate? So you were the moderator.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm remembering is when I did the You Care, when we sat down on the stage and we asked
And this is kind of what I wanted to say. Sorry, real quick. And then you did the last debate that we had before COVID shut us down. I wanted to show, like, you were everywhere and everything. You moderated the debate in St. George. And then the last debate we had, was You Care. And that was the last one before COVID hit.
Yeah. The people running for governor all of them were my friends.
Yeah.
I lead a public policy institute, so I felt it was pretty important that I stay independent and, sort of unbiased in, how we do things. I had some feelings about it. Jeff, you're an interesting one to me there because I love it when fresh people enter the public square and bring their talents and have the courage to step out, to put their name on a ballot, and also to put their family through it.
Yeah.
And so mostly what sticks out for me is just this obligation to treat everybody fairly.
Yeah. And I think you did a great job of that.
Thank you.
It was really fun. And do you like being because I'm going to guess you're an introvert. Mm-hmm. You said that you love the quiet times in your office.
Sure.
Looking at data, creating graphs, thinking. I love thinking as well. But then you're at the center of everything, Natalie. Again, you're moderating the first debate in St. George. You're moderating the last one that we had here in Salt Lake for You Care. Do you enjoy that or not? What part of, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the way I think of it is, again, it's these doors opening.
Yeah.
And so I've spent the last 8 years I've been a policy entrepreneur, Jeff. You might think that it's only in business, but to take a university institute and make it go live and have it be relevant and meaningful, and have it develop a strong reputation for being a place of trust, a truth teller, it takes an enormous amount of effort.
Yeah.
And so I've put so much time into that. So when someone calls and says, will you be on this podcast, or will you present here? Will you moderate this? I'm usually thinking about it. Does it help the Institute?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the answer that you wanted, but
I want just the full Natalie. That's what I'm.
Yeah. I'm just trying to do the very best I can to, when we started the Gardner Institute, so you think of the Aspen Institute, Colorado, or the Hoover Institute in Palo Alto. You think of the Brookings Institution in D.C., the American Enterprise Institute. All these great places, cities, have a place where they come together and learn about our complex world. And there's no better place for that to happen than the Gardner Institute. Why is that? Flagship university, capital city, big mansion on South Temple, so it's a gathering place.
Yeah.
And the community's invested in it. And so I'm, deeply committed to that, and it's a real capstone for me after all the years of public policy work that I've been involved in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that you look at things through a lens of service and impact, and if you feel like you can be of service, you're happy to step up and maybe even do something that's not as comfortable to So I've always appreciated that about you, Natalie. And I enjoyed getting to know you so much better running for governor. So we could go so many places. Like there's no way in this one conversation that we could go all the places that we could. But I just want to ask you, we're sitting here in September 2021. I just felt like the current state of affairs, Natalie. Mm-hmm. What is your view? You can talk about Utah in general, and you could take this whichever way you want to and kind of guide our discussion. But and/or our country, and/or the world. Like what is our current state of affairs? I'm asking because a lot of conversations that I've been having the last month or two is just like, things aren't back to normal. Mm-hmm. Like things still feel weird. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying in kind of life in general. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, businesses are really struggling with supply chain issues. Like there are deeper issues in the economy than maybe we are necessarily grappling with or aware of right now. Yet, conversely, we have so much money in the system. Has our economic system ever seen this much money, Natalie? Mm-hmm. And so everything from, I've been saying, lumber to cryptocurrency, everything from lumber to crypto, plywood to crypto is expensive. Everything. So it's just such an interesting, then you have climate change, which seemed more, I guess, in our face, at least it seemed more in our face this year with all the wildfires here in the Western U.S. and everything else that's happening. It just seems, the world seems weird, Natalie. Mm-hmm. I think that's the general feeling for a lot of people in business and in just life. Obviously, we're not, we talk about the new normal. I don't necessarily want to talk about that. I don't even know exactly what that means. We're not going back to where we were. You never do. You always go forward. But what is your view of like the current state of affairs? What's interesting to you and what do you think?
Well,
it's a broad question.
Yeah. And Jeff, where I want to take that is I guess I will just say I'm agreeing with you. Everything you're saying resonates with me. It's a weird time.
It is.
Yeah. And you don't come out of a 100-year event without it being weird. And, in economics, we call it an exogenous shock. Well, this was a big shock.
Yeah.
But what I would want to reflect on is a couple of things that, you say we stay positive, we stay hopeful, and those sorts of things on this podcast. Utah's super interesting here.
Yeah.
If I look at the number of jobs in every state in 2019 of August, and then I go to 2021 of August, and I just calculate the percent change, there's only 3 states that have grown.
Wow.
But their job base has grown in that 2-year period. And why do we do 2 years? Because the pandemic's in the middle, and you just take that out. We're just forgetting it happened and just said, where were you in 2019? Where are you today? Idaho, Utah, and Arizona.
Yeah.
This little line, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the first things I would just say is what a special state we live in. Mm-hmm. What an amazing place. And I can show you, reams of data that would tell you that we're in a privileged position in Utah. So that's a positive.
That is a positive. Yep.
I would agree with you that climate is an issue that we've got to get our arms around. And if it doesn't happen in the current generation of leaders, it will happen with the next generation because it resonates with our younger set, if you will.
Yeah.
Equity, diversity, inclusion. No going back. This isn't a moment. This is a movement, meaning I think we see this,
in
a very vivid way. I was at Mount Vernon 10 days ago. They never talk about slaves. They talk about enslaved persons.
Yeah.
They hold up a little 8.5 by 11 sheet that says, when you're thinking about Mount Vernon, here's the 300 some odd people that lived here, and they have a color for all of them that were enslaved persons, and then they have the 12 or so that were paid to work there, and then they have 6 that were Washingtons. But it's 300 plus that were enslaved persons, and none of us can feel good about that.
Yeah.
And I went to Gettysburg. None of us can feel good about that.
Yeah.
And if you read the literature, study the data, what you see is that the only time in American history when we've been this divided was the Civil War. When we've been worse.
Yeah.
So, knowing that, I'll tell a really interesting book for readers, The Upswing. By Robert Putnam.
Okay.
Putnam shows in this book, he calls it the I, we, I. And Jeff can see I'm moving my hands like a bell curve, the I, the we in the middle, and then the I. But the I is, the Gilded Age, a very individualistic, self-centered kind of age, roaring 20s. And then we get to Eisenhower's presidency. It was the peak of our sort of social contract, collaboration, cooperation. And then now we're back to the I. So the I, we, I is how he's talking about it in the book. And I think there's a lesson here, and there's a responsibility, there's a calling on all of us to figure out our way back to, I don't mind all the, rugged individualism, but we've got to have enlightened self-interest, not just self-interest.
Yeah, I like that. And I agree with you. And that is hard to do. Like, I think we're grappling with that. You talk about, equity, diversity, and inclusion. How do we get there, Natalie? Because, and again, I'm super interested in the economy, but man, I see what we're doing to our own currency. I see what the federal government is doing. And I'll tell you, one of my biggest concerns for the next decade is economic inequality in the United States of America. I mean, this is going to have a major impact. And those, I'll just speak, that own assets, so kind of the whatever upper portion that own assets, they're all riding the wave of inflation and of asset value creation. If you don't own assets, though, this is becoming harder and harder. And so we've all traveled to countries. I was in a Latin America country, a couple of years ago before COVID, and I was held up at gunpoint because, and by the way, when I looked at this, it was probably a 18 to 20-year-old man. When I looked him in the eyes and kind of handed over my stuff, and my heart went out to him. Like, he was desperate.
Yeah, you were in harm's way, but you were feeling for him.
I was, because, and I was in shock, of course, and a little concerned. But as I reflect on it, he was in desperation mode. So I don't want to, and the reason is, I don't want to name the country because I don't want to, say anything bad about any country, but it was economic disparity. You have these ultra wealthy and rich, and then you have so many other people that can hardly make ends meet. So I'm not saying that we're there in the U.S. or that I hope we're not going there, but I am really concerned about economic inequality in the United States. Again, and I'm concerned about the government printing money. I'm worried about inflation. What are your thoughts about the economy and all this?
Well, we know that we have to reinvent the social safety net. That it was designed for a different time, a different period.
Will that happen?
Well,
I guess we'll be forced to make it happen.
Complete dysfunction, in Washington. So this is a complicated topic, but
yes.
But one of my greatest hopes of the Utah congressional delegation is that they will face up to our fiscal responsibility and, fix Medicare, fix Medicaid, fix Social Security. I'm talking about all the entitlements.
Yeah.
And put us in a place where our fiscal house is in order, and we have to make some sacrifices.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's going to come from, though. And so you very quickly, Jeff, run away screaming from Washington because we don't know how we're going to help there, but let's stay positive. But you get really, I am a big believer in localism and what states can do to be helpful. So I love letting our state officials figure things out rather than the Beltway.
Yeah. It's not going to be easy. It doesn't feel like, doesn't it feel like that?
No, it's not.
It almost feels like, and again, I'm staying positive, but it feels like I've never felt that things were so uncertain in my lifetime. Do you feel the same way? I'm just curious. You're a couple of years older than me.
I'm definitely a few years older than you are. I'll tell you what you feel when you're my age. You think about your kids. Now, I'm sure you do too, but let me just give you a little bit more perspective there. When COVID started to happen, I wasn't thinking about my husband. I wasn't thinking about me. I was thinking about how this affects my children.
Yeah.
Because, they have anxieties and concerns, and I've done what I'm going to do. I mean, I've got years ahead of me, but I really think about younger generations. And the truth is that they all have their own time and place to do things. I sent a brother off to the Vietnam War. I watched my mother plant a tree the day he left. I remember when he came home and the joy that my family felt. And that was a big deal in my family. And, my kids are going to have other big deals. But going back to the Putnam book, he points out that we've never been at a higher level of inequality.
Yeah.
And then he also points out the lessons learned from the last time we had an upswing. A lot of people think you have to have a crisis to change things, and that's not what he concludes. He concludes that all the little things matter and that change comes from within.
That's cool.
So, take that and run with it. I mean, really, just think, what can you do?
Yeah, what can you do locally? What can you do
every day?
Yeah. Yeah, when, all of this happened, shortly after losing out the governor's race, we were still in the midst of COVID and the Black Lives Matter, issues were going on. And I took inventory and said, what can I just personally do? What little things can I do? And as an investor and an entrepreneur, I look for little things that I could do to try to build a community. Like you said, and my point is, I'm not trying to, I think we all do that, and we want everyone to do that. And that's probably the answer. There isn't some big grandiose answer. It's kind of probably in small actions within individuals and families that make the difference in the end, I hope.
Well, and I'll give some props to Utah here. There's times when the data are a little different, but basically we have the most equal distribution of income of any state in the country here in Utah. Depending on the year, it might be third, but among the highest. And it's so compelling here that not only is our distribution of income equal at the state level, the Salt Lake metro area is like the best of the metro areas. West Valley City is the best nationwide of cities over 100,000.
Wow.
And you can even go to a neighborhood in Kearns, Utah, that has I think it's like the third most equal distribution of income among neighborhoods in the nation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The way I want to give hope is to say, do what you can yourself, and then also be proud of this state, because our state has amazing outcomes.
Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're going to love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
You mentioned your brother leaving, and I know you came from a big family.
Mm-hmm.
And did you grow up in Utah?
I did. I grew up in the Sugar House, East Mill Creek area. I'm an Olympus High graduate.
Okay. So you live pretty close to there. I mean, you haven't moved far from home.
Yeah, I'm a Murray resident now. I'm the youngest of 11.
Wow.
Yeah. So
what do you take from that experience, that interesting growing up family experience? How did that prepare you?
Well, I have 7 older brothers.
Yeah.
That's usually the way I'd answer that. Just
Were they tough on you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just think they still are.
Yeah.
Just think about that. And I had incredible parents. My father was a psychiatrist, a physician. 10 siblings, and I guess what I took from it is I learned a lot of independence and how to stand on my own feet. Because with 11 children, you better have a strong sense of yourself. Yeah,
and I think in politics, you're kind of in the center, in the middle. Did that also influence that kind of finding common ground, or almost? I want to say like I come from a family of 6, and there's a brother that we kind of call the peacemaker. Mm-hmm. He was the guy who would kind of try to bring us all together after we had our fights at the basketball hoop, or, over whatever the thing may be. Do you think that?
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question. I in my family, there was already someone that was the straight A student. There was already the beauty queen. There was already the religious scholar. There was already the jock or whatever. I don't know what
was left for Natalie to do. Yeah, little Natalie. Yeah.
And so the
youngest.
Yeah, and so you take a little bit from all of it. But you might find this interesting. I mentioned that when I was doing the card thing with a professional coach, that simplicity came out as one of my cards. The 2 other ones were goodness and balance.
Mm.
Right?
That's good. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know, but and what I did is after I picked those, the woman I was working with said, now you got to go live them for a couple of weeks, and in 2 weeks, let's talk about whether those were true.
Yeah.
And sure enough, as I'm living 2 weeks, I'm going, oh, that's my balance instinct. Oh, that's my goodness instinct. And so balance is the one I wanted to highlight here. Is yes, I'm a very much a political moderate. I believe that people have different life experiences, and we need to learn from all of them. And I take the best ideas from the left, the best ideas from the right, form my own, personal ideology, but always respect others as well.
Do you enjoy podcasting? The other side of the aisle, both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, both sides of the aisle on KSPW. I do. But, it's like a lot of things. What I enjoy the most is the relationships with Shireen Gorbani and Dan McKay.
Yeah.
Every week we're together and we exchange notes. And sometimes, Dan will get under my skin and I'll tell him that. And then we'll become friends again.
Oh, Dan gets under everyone's skin sometimes. By the way, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He was my running mate in the governor's race, lieutenant governor there at the end, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Funny. But he is, he is He's not easy. He is opinionated, and he has good ideas, but he's not afraid to share them.
He won't like me saying this, but he's more of a centrist than people think.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. I think when we break things down in the end, I think a lot of us, again, the point of this podcast, we all come from different places, but we all have a lot to build from. We are all a lot more alike than we are different. You mentioned Kearns, and I traveled all around the state. One of the best things in Kearns is the huge ice oval from the 2002 Olympics here in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Absolutely.
You were involved a little bit in that, working in the Levitt administration at the time.
Yeah.
And the Olympics are maybe coming back. Tell us, I don't know, what was your experience like in 2002, and how do you feel about the Olympics possibly coming back to the state?
I would say if it's not the most, it's in the top 3 most significant things I've ever been a part of professionally.
Wow, really?
For sure.
Oh, why? Yeah. Why?
Well, I think it's partly the buildup. So, when Anchorage, Alaska used to be America's choice for the games, and when the U.S. Olympic Committee decided to open it up again, I was working at the state capitol in the planning office and took the phone call from the head of our Olympic Committee to just say, hey, they're opening up the bid. Can you guys help us with the economics? This was Tom Welch calling my boss, and I picked up that call. So I don't know the year of that, but that's probably like 88, 87.
Wow, so a ways.
Long ways ago.
Yeah.
So then you go all the way to building the facilities. You mentioned the oval, but there's the bobsled, the luge run, the ski jumps, and the like. We did a sales tax diversion to make that happen. Well, guess who helped do those original spreadsheets for the sales tax diversion?
Natalie.
I was there.
Natalie Gochnour.
That was something we did.
Yep.
Then we had to do the economic impact analyses to help us understand it. That came out of a group that I worked with. Anyway, you flash forward that all the way to the hosting of the games, and by the time we host, I'm Governor Levitt's spokesperson.
I get it, yeah.
So I'm involved in the whole media. 1.2 billion people watched opening ceremony.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And we had
you had the point is you had 15 years of run up kind of to that.
Yeah, to our moment. And then we had the disappointment of 9/11 just months before our games, and how did that affect things, and all these trips to Washington to bring in security funding to help us be safe during the games. And so I just have extraordinary memories of that time.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you one more that you'll find interesting. We were trying so hard to use it as a way to put a spotlight on our state. And one of the ways you do that is you bring in cabinet members. You get the Secretary of Interior to come. Then you get the Secretary of Energy to come. And every time we landed one, like in the buildup, like they committed to be here, we would celebrate in the governor's office. And I don't remember exactly, but I think we had like 6 committed. And we were just thrilled to have 6 here for opening ceremony the same day. Well, Air Force One showed up on the morning of opening ceremony. It snowed the night before. And the president must have asked, who wants to come, go into opening ceremony. And we got like 6 more cabinet members, Condoleezza Rice,
awesome.
Donald Rumsfeld, Colin Powell. Yeah. Anyway, that was special for our state.
That was special. What do you think about having the Olympics come back?
We need to do, we're America's choice. When they decide to bid again, we will be the bid city for the United States. It will come here. Yeah. It's just a matter of whether it's 2030 or 2034. And it's complicated. LA has it in 2028. So that's the, big rub of do you do them back to back in the United States? But in the end, it's one of the greatest gifts we can give to our children and grandchildren.
That's cool. Oh man, there's so much else to cover. But you mentioned that Governor Levitt was your biggest mentor. I think you said that. What did you learn from Governor Levitt? And let me just say, he's someone I also knew a little bit, mainly from Levitt Partners, honestly, in business a little bit. But he's someone that I went and saw several times. I actually went to his house and went to his office in downtown, and Rich McEwen as well. And just about the governor race. And how I would describe him, this is me describing it. I've said this to a couple people, including, I think, my wife. He's kind of, I feel like, kind of saintly right now. Like he's done his thing. He's made it happen. He gave me great advice. He was just kind of, I think, watching out for the best. He wants the best for Utah. I just love Mike Levitt and where he's at right now. And what are the most important things? A couple things you learned from him?
Jeff, where I will start is just a really simple phrase. He never let me down. Now, you might think, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
But I'm meaning his ethics, his sense of integrity.
That's a powerful statement.
Well, I worked so closely with him, where we went through 2 confirmation hearings in Washington together, where he went through the Olympic bid scandal and helped through that and all these things. Late nights on planes and just all the things that go with carrying on an agenda like he carried, and he personally never let me down in terms of his behavior and actions. So
that's huge.
It's huge.
I mean, if someone that you work with so many people in these high stakes environments, man, if someone could say that about me or you, that's awesome, isn't it?
That's the second thing I'd say is his capacity to have an aspirational vision and to strategize on how to accomplish it. He's the finest example of that I've ever come across. And I remember when we went to Washington, people kept saying, you don't know what Washington's like. It's bone on bone power, and the folksy things that Mike Levitt says won't work there, and get ready. People were just acting like we were just going to sink.
Yeah.
And then I get back there and he just excels. He became the star cabinet member, and all the tough assignments in the Bush administration, at least while I was back there, would come to Mike Levitt. Import safety was a big issue. The Virginia Tech shootings, they should have maybe gone somewhere else, but they came to Mike because he was so good. So he's an incredibly talented person. Just to be around that talent, I counted as a professional blessing for me.
That's awesome. What was it like to work back in D.C. in the Bush administration? For most people will visit D.C. or might visit D.C. at times, but they will never have the chance to work back there, especially in a presidential administration. I don't know. What would surprise people about it?
I think it would surprise people how there's basically 2 classes of people working in Washington, the political appointees and the career service professionals.
Yeah.
And maybe that's an obvious. But...
Well, no, it's not. By the way, I say yeah like that. Having run for I didn't understand that before I ran for governor.
Well, it was so foreign to me. I went to the Environmental Protection Agency. This is after Christy Todd Whitman finished, and now we had Administrator Levitt. And, there was basically the career service staff and the political appointee staff, and there'd be meetings. It'd be, this is politicals only. This is both. And that was so foreign to me.
Yeah, that's
because in Utah we just would lead.
Yeah.
And be the same. And that was a hallmark of Mike Levitt, is he's like, break down those barriers. We're all trying to protect human health and the environment. Don't do that. But just how political Washington is, I don't think people can really grasp it until you're there.
Yeah. It's
also
disheartening.
Yeah, but I'll also say that in my field, so you're an entrepreneur. In public policy, the very best make it to Washington at some point in their career.
Yeah.
And so if you're over air quality at a state level and you're really good at it, eventually they're going to pull you in to be over air quality nationally or in a significant role. And so for someone like me, it's just invigorating to be around the talent.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, and these people, what I found is that they're good at many things. What distinguishes these public policy professionals in Washington is they're not just great scientists. They're also great communicators.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That's exciting. I'm going to end here with 2 kind of personal questions. Natalie's lived an amazing life, in my opinion, and is an amazing person. But every life, there are challenges, there are struggles. We all fall down. We all have struggles. How have you overcome the darkest times in your life? What have you struggled with, or what have been issues? What have you learned from that? Sometimes we get people on here and it's like, I can't relate. Well, I think we can all relate to each other talk to us in as much as you want to and how you want to about struggles that you've faced and how you've overcome those things and kept coming out and, being a better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're asking a very personal question, and I guess it requires a personal answer. and the way I'd respond to that is I have a really strong commitment to spiritual things in my life. I've become persuaded that we're dual beings, if you will, that we have a physical side and a spiritual side, and we spend all of our lives focused on that physical side, and that we do that to our detriment. That the spiritual side is equally important. And, it can be meditation, it can be reflection, it can be prayer.
Yeah.
But for me, in the darkest and hardest times in my life, I've relied on that sense of, spiritual strength.
Yeah.
As a way to propel me.
Yeah.
And I count it as just hugely important in my life.
Do you spend more and more time thinking about that side of your life, the spiritual side of your life, as you would say? Like you say that you like to spend a lot of quiet time, a lot of thought, a lot of reading, I don't know. Do you find yourself drawn more and more to that? Or?
Yeah. Well, interesting that you'd ask, because I couldn't have said this in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
It happened when I was working in Washington. And not that was a high point in my life. It wasn't a low point, but there was a 9-month period where I was commuting.
Yeah.
And so you think of commuting to Salt Lake City while your kids are here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
That's hard.
Yeah, it doesn't work. But you learn things you can't learn any other way. And during this time, my father passed away. Mm-hmm. And so I had this routine where I'd fly out of Washington on Thursday or Friday, be here the weekend, Sunday nights, I'm on the direct flight to D.C., and I'd stop and see my dad on the way out. He's on his deathbed. So those flights back to Washington really, and then I'm in Washington for a week, living in a studio apartment alone, right?
Yeah.
So we're out of time, but I would just say that for me, so these spiritual things came later for me in life.
Interesting.
And now sure, I may focus on them more, but what I do more is I share them with others, help others.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Last question. So we've talked about the maybe unsteady state of current affairs and what gives you hope? You've expressed hope this entire interview, but maybe what are you looking forward to in the future? What are you excited about? What gives you hope despite our kind of current, you spoke about how we're so divided. And really, I think I couldn't have maybe articulated it as well as I can now, although I spoke about it from the very beginning. I think that's really why I did this podcast, Natalie, is I traveled around even just our little great state and met with thousands or tens of thousands of people and saw how great they were, but how divided we were. I couldn't help but try to raise my voice in a small way and say, look, people, we are divided. We have differences, but we have so much more in common. Let's build from this common ground and try to support and help each other. And anyways, I think that's a lot of why this podcast exists. What gives you hope for the future? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to?
My mother, Jeff, gave me the gift of optimism. It's something that swells inside me. I don't have many days when I'm just looking inward in a sad way.
Yeah.
That's just a gift I have.
That's awesome.
So I think of hope. I'll quote, a common phrase that hope is the anchor of the souls of man and women, right? And what should you hope for? You should hope for a better world. And so in my optimism, I will always keep hoping for a better world. And I think we can do it. I'm not disturbed. I'm not,
you're not troubled.
I'm not too distracted. I mean, I may be a little troubled.
I just wanted to gut check because I think
it's a tough time. It's a tough time, but I would say that, there's forces that propel us to do right and to do good. And this country is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. The state of Utah is nation leading. And, when I look around the people that are important to me, the people I work with at the institute I lead, my family, friends and associates, we can make good things happen. We can get back on the upswing, if you will.
Yeah, I believe that for sure. Thanks for being such a good example, Natalie. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Don't I say that a lot to start the wrap up? But that's the point. Like, wow for everyone. There are wow things about everyone. I'm just so impressed with everyone. And specifically today, it was a blessing to be with Natalie Gochnour. Look, we all see things a little differently, but Natalie just has this kindness in her voice and in her manner that I just love and appreciate. Here are a couple key takeaways from me today. Number one, and I think I share this in common with Natalie, I love this, being able to kind of cut through the clutter, cut through the noise, and just distill down to what really matters. I think Natalie is great at that. There's a ton of great research at the Gardner Policy Institute. She is behind a lot of it. And she communicates, like she said, communicates the data in an effective way. Number two, she comes from a large family where she learned some important things and values, and she has found her way to make a difference in the world, to give back. She said that there was a jock in her family and a beauty queen and whatever else, an academic. Natalie has become a master of so many things, and I just see her as someone who is so competent in helping our state and our country grow. I love and appreciate that about her. Equity, diversity, inclusion, that is something we are all thinking about. We all need to work on. Natalie is a great example to so many of us. She's in the middle of so many of the good things that are happening here in our state. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you learned a little bit about all of these different things, economics, politics, what's going on in Utah and all around our country. Thanks again, Natalie, for your friendship. I appreciate it and love our conversations. Everyone is enlightening and inspiring because you are inspiring.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Us Podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing at your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for your support and love for the Extraordinary Us podcast. We just got news that we are in the top 2% of podcasts in all the world. So please keep loving and listening and share with a friend. But also, there's another podcast that Sally and I are doing together.
There is. It's called Under Our Bed, and you've heard about it.
You've heard the promos.
You've heard it, and guess what?
It's actually out now.
It's
You can
here.
actually find it.
You can really listen to it now.
It wasn't like a fake tease and then it pulled away. It's really there.
It's a real podcast.
It is a
Not
real
fake.
podcast. Sorry, guys. It took us a little bit longer to get it published. We're not great at this, but Under Our Bed is here.
You're going to love it.
Just so sure of that.
I'm just so confident.
Episode 1, we talk about why the name and explain the name. Episode 2, we talk about
Doing the unexpected.
the joy of doing the unexpected. In upcoming episodes, you'll hear more exciting topics. So tune in and subscribe now. Good night, Sal.
Good night.